Yeah.
You know, Jerome Martin is injured with a broken foot.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys stay. I mean, it's just a
right. I don't know why they shouldn't have left, but
well,
probably figured they were going to get phased out. But I don't. You can't be phased.
You can't
out.
phase those guys out. I mean, you know, I mean. Yeah, it's a shame. So nobody.
Not that I understand. No.
Wow.
All the operations moved to EJ, the EJ building, and then they've got some print guys in our building now. But yeah, now it's all moved to Mobile.
Okay.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by.
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we're going to talk a lot of New Orleans Saints. Matter of fact, it's going to be wall-to-wall New Orleans Saints. We got a great one for you. Larry Holder, Saints columnist for NOLA.com, is going to be our lone guest tonight. You'll be able to join us at 1:30 as we'll take phone calls during that time. But Larry, as we get started, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. And tell the folks a little bit about what's happening over at NOLA.com.
Well, I like this intimate setting.
Yes,
you
it is.
and me. I mean, I can reach across the table.
That's true. You know,
and grab you if I need to.
If you know, maybe a little bottle of wine, a little cigar, we can, you know,
now
turn the lights down.
Would be a show.
Yes,
now,
it would be.
That would be. That's post game show.
Yeah, that is the post game.
Yeah.
We let it out the bag.
Exactly. No, but of course, look, season's over. Doesn't matter. Football is basically a 365 a year job now, and of course, we're covering all angles at NOLA.com. And, of course, in the print editions of the Times-Picayune. I've been doing the last week, and I'm going to wrap it up tomorrow, my player grades,
yes,
which is always a pretty controversial issue, just depending on how I see players compared to maybe what the public sees. And, of course, next week's the Senior Bowl. We're going to have all wall-to-wall coverage of all that, on the website, podcasts, videos, stories, columns, you name it, we'll have it at NOLA.com.
When you do a grade like that in the paper, is it a composite of what you looked at the entire season? How do you go back and do that?
It's a little different depending on the player. Maybe I'm a little harsher on a player if his expectation was supposed to be higher, and maybe if the player comes in and only plays a couple of games per se. Let's give her an example. Say Travaris Cadet, for example.
Yes.
He came in, played better than I anticipated the final 2 games. I got to weigh him not being on the roster and yet what he was able to do in those 2 games. But look, I've given grades from A to F
Yes.
For players, and so it's and there's a lot of average, which is not good because
Right.
the Saints were a lot more, even below average if you look at the record.
When you look at some of the young players as you went on and graded them, did you find over the course of the season that most of those guys got better as they went along, that maybe they hit a little bit of a roadblock? Can fans look forward to guys that, after they've kind of got a little bit of NFL experience under their belt this past season, that they're going to have the opportunity that maybe we'll start to see them flourish a little bit more next season, in your opinion?
I think it's interesting, and it's definitely case by case. Because, say, for Stephon Anthony, I think at times he showed flashes,
Yes.
and then at other times he looked like a rookie, over pursuing plays. And yet you've got to kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. A, he's a rookie. B, he had 2 defensive coordinators. I think that's an interesting case. And then you look at the case of Heoli Kikaha. Played real well, probably say the first 7 or 8 games, got injured, and then when Dennis Allen takes over, his role changes and they don't know what to do with him. So you see kind of an up and down season for him. And like Andres Pete, I think he played better the later, and he finally got some
Yes.
game action. And then you move him over from guard. He was up and down to where he was at tackle. I think he played better there. It really just depends on the position. And there's a lot of rookies, obviously. And
Yes.
so I think it was a lot of ups, a lot of downs, depending on the player. But overall, I'd say you had to be happy with some of the production. You knew it wasn't going to be complete wall-to-wall great or complete wall-to-wall disaster for
Yes.
some of these guys.
What's interesting is we've talked about this rookie class over and over again. When you have that many picks, a la Belichick, you're in a position where if you do bust out on a couple, it doesn't hurt you as bad because you've got a lot of picks. You've got 2 guys on injured reserve right now, Davis Tull and P.J. Williams, that were expected to contribute. But what'll be interesting is, as we look back on this draft in maybe 3 years or so, if anyone emerges as a superstar. Right now, it doesn't look like it's a superstar draft, that there'll be one. Looks like it's just going to be some solid players. On the flip side, I've been one that have said, this has got to be a draft where, like 06, where you get some guys that'll be here 10 years, but you get some guys that are going to be perennial all-pros.
Right, and you have to look at the 06 draft as well. With, say, Marcus Colston, of that draft, he's the one who broke out right away. Because think back to that draft. First season, Roman Harper, knee injury, only played like 4 games. Rob Ninkovich, he's the infamous one who got away.
Yes.
He got an injury early, out for the season as well. So those guys were kind of like the Tull and kind of like the P.J. Williams. And Harper was going to start. He was starting, and then they had to find plan B. Reggie Bush wasn't the superstar. And so let's fast forward to, say, 2013, because we're at the point where 3 years has passed. You can judge that draft. And I think you did find one superstar in Teron Armstead. So
Yes.
to see where this class goes, we do have to give it some time. I do think guys like Anthony, Kikaha, I think they have playmaking ability.
Right.
Now, can they progress and move forward? I think that's the big question that the Saints need. And then, again, some other guys under the radar. Tyler Davison, what can he do? Can Marcus Murphy bounce back after kind of being demoted,
Right, no doubt.
after having some issues just holding on to the football? So I think there is potential for some of that. And yet you could look back at 13 and you might have saw potential, say, Kenny Stills, Vaccaro, and yet Armstead is the one who's kind of
Yes.
at that guy who could be a superstar.
Yeah, and again, we still don't know what Garrett Grayson will bring to the table.
Right.
And we may not know for quite a few years, which kind of takes me to my next question. Your thoughts on Drew Brees and how they handle this going forward. $30 million salary cap hit. Obviously, last year the deal. Saints have already said they want to sign him to somewhat of a long-term deal. What do you think the parameters of that deal will be, and what do you think the average salary will be for Breeze going forward?
There are many different variables within this equation. It has to do with the present and then the future. And it has to do with Drew Brees and then who follows Drew Brees. I wrote a column about that today at NOLA.com. It'll be in our print editions on Friday. And I think for Drew Brees, let's just start with that contract. I think that if you can average out, say, the next 3 years, 16, 17, 18, around $18 or $19 million a year, is Drew technically taking a pay cut? Technically, yes. But that would be the market value for someone his age at his skill level. And so as long as you get that $30 million number down, I think that's extremely crucial. I think every party knows that this has to take place. And yet I think Drew is still going to fight for top dollar. But I think if you can get a cap number to 19 a year or even 20 a year, if the deal stays the same, people see the $30 million number and think, oh, he's getting $30 million this year. It's not the case. It's just the bonuses were prorated and pushed back.
Yes.
He got $40 million cash the first year.
Yes.
So you got to understand those parameters. But I think they should do an extension. I would say 16, 17, 18, he should be under contract if I were doing it. And I wouldn't have a big deal or big issue if it were $20 million per year as a cap number.
You know, I think that is a good number for him, honestly, especially when you look at the landscape of the quarterbacks in the NFL, what they're getting.
Yeah, I think it's fair.
I think it's fair on both sides.
It's a fair number, right, exactly.
You know, and, you know, the interesting thing is going forward, and look, Breeze has kind of amazed everyone with his ability to be able to come back from injury. You know, look, guys get injured in the NFL. And you're hoping that you can build an offensive line, especially in the waning years of Breeze's years in the NFL, that will be able to protect him. But the ability to come back and play through injuries is something you don't see with older players. And that's one of the things that you have to, when you look forward, the way he keeps his body in shape, et cetera, is that something he's going to be able to keep up down the line here.
I don't see why he couldn't, because let's be honest, he had a shoulder injury. He played through it. You could tell when he came back, they had to kind of limit the offense until the strength in the shoulder came back. And let's be honest, by the end of the season, the strength was definitely back. He was not the problem. He was the solution. And then you look at the foot injury. I thought for sure that the Saints would go the route, sit him,
Yes.
play either Grayson or Flynn. I would have preferred Grayson.
Right.
And you don't necessarily tank the final two games. But if you lose with Grayson, oh, well, you lose with him. You're just trying to see what they have. But the last two games helped Drew's value.
Yes.
For himself personally, and it helped the Saints' confidence for Drew moving forward. The guy, look, that was a painful injury.
That's a very painful injury.
Absolutely.
I've had it.
Yeah.
I know it's painful, and it's got to be tough on a professional athlete. Look, Peyton Manning has played through injuries many, many times, and he couldn't play through that injury. Again, we don't know the severity of the injury as opposed to what Breeze had, but that's not easy for a guy that obviously has to throw the football, constantly moving, etc. And you got to give him a lot of credit for playing through that injury. Still today, from what we understand, getting treatment,
Right.
to try to get back on, on his feet, so to speak.
Right, yeah. He's doing, it doesn't have to be as aggressive, but it could be a normal timetable. Typically he goes to San Diego when the season
Yes.
ends. He's having to stay in town a little longer to make sure he gets it done right. And, I'm sure it's not that bad. But here's the interesting part. You mentioned Peyton Manning, and he couldn't play through it. And it all ties together when you're doing a contract and you're comparing numbers to Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, similar age when they're getting these new deals. One guy couldn't play through the injury, and yet he's making $19 million a year. Drew played through the injury. He should probably get more. And, oh, by the way, they're both represented by Tom Condon. So it's amazing that Tom Condon can play off of the way Peyton Manning couldn't play in the injury.
Yes.
And he could say, well, look, my guy Drew, he's played, and he was your NFL passing leader this year.
And let's face it, Condon is not one to be able to give at the bargaining table.
No.
We've seen that with Breeze before. We've seen that with other quarterbacks. I don't think this is going to be one of these things that a lot of people believe there's going to be a hometown discount here. I think Conan's going to try to get every single nickel he can get for Brees going forward.
Honestly, I think a hometown discount will be a ripoff because Drew Brees, at the level he's playing, he deserves a big extension. Even if it's cap friendly, he still deserves plenty of money. I can't name, you could argue where Drew Brees is in the quarterback hierarchy. At worst, he's a top 10, at worst. And I think he's more closer to being within a top 7, 6, 5. On his best day, he could be number 1. But look, he has to take market value. The market value for him is still like $20 million a year.
Absolutely.
So I think Drew Brees is not going to shortchange himself.
With that said, obviously, even though Mickey Loomis, will get into him in a moment, said that he doesn't believe the cap is in dire straits, I think most people that look at this cap right now thinks, wow, they got a tremendous amount of work to do here to be able to get under the cap. A new contract with Brees would help alleviate that, but wouldn't completely alleviate it. Your thoughts on some possible cap casualties, how they're going to maneuver this cap to get under the cap this time around?
I do think it's not as dire as it was last offseason. I think last offseason was at its worst, and you had to see all kinds of maneuverings happen. It was so bad that even going into the season, they were up against it and had to make Drew's cap number $30 million. Remember, it was only going to be about $28 million,
right.
And they had to go to the last-ditch resort and make it $30 million to make it a little more tougher on themselves this offseason. I do think that they probably see some guys like Marcus Colston that the time is up for him. I said, I'm sure on this show that I thought he would be an asset going into 15. I can't say that this year anymore. I think you look at Zach Streep. He doesn't make a ton of money, but if you can cut wherever you can cut, I think that's part of it. I think David Hawthorne's out. I think Donnell Ellerbe would have to take a pretty significant pay cut.
Now, he's an interesting case because you can cut him and there is no dead money.
That's why you're circling him big in red.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy who would be no dead money. And so, but that's the thing as well, that would you maybe want to keep him around, pay him $1 million a year, just because when he's healthy he can be okay, but he's seemingly never healthy.
Right. What about Jari Evans?
I think he can certainly be a restructure guy. I feel like he has one more year left in him. I think he played better in 15 than he did in 14. I know he's dealing with a knee injury, but of those, say, 3 veteran guys that came in 06, Streif, Colston, Evans, I think Evans is by far the most viable candidate to stay and to start.
Right.
Now, could they ask him to take a pay cut? I think they could.
Would he be willing, do you believe?
Depends. I think he would have to know that maybe another team would be interested in him, but not interested in him as much as the Saints would be willing to pay. So I think knowing that, I think he would have to be open to a pay cut.
Do you think Jari Evans at this age has market value right now?
I don't think he has as much as, look, let's go back to last offseason. They traded Ben Grubbs.
Yes.
They got a 5th-round pick for him. And I think because Grubbs had more market value than, say, maybe Jari Evans. And can Jari go somewhere and start? Probably. I think he's better than the majority of the guards in the league. But that being said, there's maybe 48% who are better than him now. But I do think he would hold value with the Saints. I think they definitely need to invest in an interior lineman. I wouldn't do it in free agency. I'd do it in the draft.
Yes.
And we both thought they should have done it last year,
Absolutely.
and they didn't.
Right.
So, but I do think Evans can come back, can start, but injuries are starting to catch up with him. I mean, that's what happens with age. And you look at him, he's one of the best draft finds the Saints have ever had.
There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Really one of the cornerstones of that 06 draft,
Absolutely.
no doubt. When you look at this offensive line going forward, because again, if you're looking to extend Brees, you better make sure you can protect Drew Brees. I guess one of the questions is, does Zach Streif take a secondary role now? Is this Andres Pete's job at the right tackle position? Clemente and Lolito are both restricted free agents. Are they feeling comfortable in bringing one or both of those guys back? When you look in your crystal ball at the future of this offensive line, what do you see?
I think Pete is your starter. look, if Streif is who he is and a man to his word, and if there's anyone in the locker room you would say would be a man to his word, it would certainly be him. He'd be the #1 candidate. If the Saints want him back, which I think they would, and if he would be willing to take a reduced role, then I think he is back. Is he starting? I don't think so. I think Andres Pete will take over that right tackle spot. You're set it with left tackle at Armstead. You're set at center with Unger. I still think Evans can come back at guard. Do I think Lolito and Kelemete, what can they bring? Look, they've been ups and down throughout the season. I mean, rotating, and so much so that they put Pete in there because neither one of them were getting the job done. Both are restricted free agents. I seriously doubt that they would give them restricted tenders, but they would sign them to a lesser deal to keep them. But I don't think they want to, because if you sign them to a tender, it jumps the salary. I don't think the Saints want any part of that. But I still think they've got to bring someone in there. Now, Lolito's getting better. I think maybe the last 2 games were his best 2 games
I
of
agree
the
with
season.
that. With that said, do you chance going into the draft and, spending, high to mid-level draft choice on a guard and then expecting that guard to come in and start?
I think you take a mid-level pick at guard and give him an opportunity to fight for a job. I might as well let all of them fight, and you never know. What if Jari comes back and he gets injured again?
Yes.
You got to have a backup plan for him.
Yes.
A la when Jamar Nesbitt was a guard and Starcap sidelined him and ended his career because Carl Nix came and took over. You had to have someone ready to go behind Nesbitt. Nix was that guy.
One of the other interesting scenarios here when you look at the salary cap is the future of Thomas Morstead. Your thoughts?
I think he still has value, but when you're penny pinching, you can find a young punter who can be 8 times less of the cost.
Yes.
And unfortunately for Thomas, bad year to have an injury. And look, I don't think he's fallen off. I think the injury certainly hindered him. They wouldn't even. He came back too early. Could only focus really in on directional punting, and sometimes it wasn't the best. Couldn't kick off. Do I think he could come back and be just as effective as he normally is? Yes, but does that come with a pay cut, or does that come with a restructure where you shift some money around, and then that makes him a candidate in future years to look at? But when you're looking everywhere, not every team has a punter that's making, what, $3-4 million against the cap.
And then if you cut him, what is it, $1.4 million, I believe, that's going to cost you in terms of dead money going forward. And that's also a tough pill to be able to swallow. What about the wide receiver position? I'm of the opinion they've got to go out and they've got to get another wide receiver in this draft, especially as we've discussed about Marcus Colston and his future. What do you think?
I think it's really up to what is there when they pick. Do I think they need to go out and get a #1 stud receiver? I feel like I flip-flop every day because I did literally today wide receiver grades. And you look at their young nucleus. Brandon Cooks, I feel like can be a #1 receiver. I might be in the minority in that, but the guy had almost 90 catches, 1,100 yards, 9 touchdowns. Drew was banged up a little bit, but once he got going, he got going.
Breeze learned how to use him.
Absolutely. I think a whole year with him, he's only going to get better. Now, Willie Snead, I think he could be a viable 2 or 3. Brandon Coleman, he got better as the season went along. That is a young nucleus. Now, do you draft a top-tier wide receiver? I don't know if that's necessarily very high on your list. I think that could be a day 2 guy, maybe even a 4th or 5th round guy. But I don't think that is as much of a priority as I would have said, say, week 9. I think they've gotten better there. And they'll probably bring in a veteran. Will it be a top dollar guy? Probably not.
But they've done well with bringing in guys that were not top dollar guys as veterans and allowing them to assimilate themselves into the offense. It's one thing about the wide receiver position. Over time, if you're a good route runner, if you catch the football, if you run the routes you're supposed to route within that route tree, and Breeze can trust you, he can make it work.
Look, Breeze trusts Cooks and he trusts Snead. I can tell you that. Does some trust need to be gained still with Coleman? Yes. But you saw an increase in his playmaking ability. I know the one that still probably sticks out to Coleman was he could have caught the ball against Atlanta. If he catches it, it's really over. But he drops it. Saints still win. But you have those three who have made plays on the big stage, but specifically Cooks and Snead.
Right.
But do I think someone can come in and maybe beat out a Coleman? I think that's possible. But I don't think it has to be at number 12 overall unless the very right player is there.
Yes.
You have far too many issues on
I agree.
defense.
And before we get to defense, the tight end position, all are not under contract. Where do you think they go there?
I think they need to draft a tight end. You look at Watson, you look at Human. I want you to say his last name.
I am not saying
I'm not
it
either.
tonight.
I'm not saying it either.
I'm
That's
not.
why Sean Payton always calls him the tight end.
Right.
Or Michael. Like they're like long lost buddies.
Yes.
But those two guys are unrestricted free agents. Josh Hill is a restricted free agent. Watson overplayed our expectations. Josh Hill, I blame Sean Payton for this, far underplayed the expectations because I think Josh Hill was a victim of Sean Payton trying to save face to the public, to not cause panic because
Yes.
Jimmy Graham. And Josh Hill was worse this year than he was last year.
Right.
So I think they could upgrade from Josh Hill. I think the Saints would like to possibly, give Watson a new deal, Human a new deal. They use Human. Heck, they used him at fullback a lot, and he was effective. So if it were me, I would bring back the two veterans, and I would not tender Hill. I would, if I was going to sign him, I'd do it a lesser deal, just like Lolito Kelemete. And yet, I think they need to draft a tight end. Again, 3rd round or later would be where I would focus.
How about Huhu Wanamanui? Is
Something
that okay?
like that.
Is that all right? That's about his best.
Human, just call him
That's
Human.
all I'm doing. And believe me, when they signed him, I was like, oh no, I got to say this name. Forget about it. Defensively is where the problem is on this team. What do you think the most pressing needs on the defensive side are?
Well, every spot along the defensive line except for Cam Jordan. And I think that should be the focus round 1, round 2 of the draft. I don't think they need to be going out and spending big money in free agency on that. You find youth there, and youth means they're inexpensive as well. They had to do that this year, and it didn't totally pan out for them because they're going undrafted route with some of these guys. And long time veteran like a Kevin Williams, I think round 1, round 2, it could be vice versa, defensive end, defensive tackle. I think that's something that they've already looked into. I think they look pretty long and hard next week at the Senior Bowl at a guy like Jaron Reed from Alabama who's going to be there, who's a senior. I know Ashawn Robinson is their other guy who looks like he's Vince Wilfork. I mean, he looks like he's about 40 years old already. He's not that old yet. But I think for sure that has to be beefed up because it can coat problems everywhere else.
Yeah. What about that linebacker position?
I think you need a weak side linebacker. I mean, we talked about Ellerby already.
That's right.
And so I think they need to focus in on that. I keep mentioning Alabama guys. Those are the guys who stick out.
Well, I mean,
Reggie Ragland is a guy who's inside linebacker, played very well.
Anybody from Clemson.
Right, anybody from Clemson.
Right, on both the line or the linebacker position.
Exactly.
Some are saying that the Saints ought to look at the cornerback position. I'm one that maybe would back off on that, considering what you saw to Devin Breaux, the unknown in P.J. Williams, and of course, hoping that Keenan Lewis comes back. What's your take?
You can't hope you have a number 2 cornerback. They hoped they had that in 2014, blew up in their face. They hoped they had that in 2015, but if Keenan Lewis is healthy, you might have a different story. You cannot go into 15 hoping on a guy. You have to have some sort of assurance. And the last time they had assurance there was when Lewis and Jabari Greer played together. There's been no assurance since. So I think you have to look at corner. Maybe not. It's not a huge need.
Free agency or draft?
I don't think you go free agency. Unfortunately, you're going to be stuck with Browner again.
Yes.
You spend $5 million a year on him. You can't go and
He's
get bid again.
he's almost uncuttable because of his cap number.
Yeah. So you got to have him around one more year. But you got to see if Keenan Lewis can play. But cornerback, it's like quarterback, and it's like a pass rusher. Those 3 spots, if you can get a stud guy, you've got to get them because they are not something easily found. Delvin Breaux was almost luck of the draw. The Saints found him. Without him, they were completely a disaster
Yes.
corner.
Looking forward in terms of the front office, and I guess I'll move on before we go to our break to Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis. First of all, your thoughts on whether Sean Payton was actually shopped. I know they've done the play on words, or, whether it's Payton or Loomis at this point. We never spoke to anyone. Well, maybe, the agent. Do you believe the splash reports? Do you not believe the splash reports? What's your take on this whole scenario?
I think Payton tried to get out, and I think he used that as a bargaining chip. If the right deal would have happened, I think he would have left.
I agree.
And yet, I do also believe Sean Payton in this, that that the grass isn't always greener somewhere else, that he likes New Orleans, he loves New Orleans, and would he like to give it one last ride with Drew after seeing a team that wins 3 of their last 4 games? Yes, but I think if the right deal would have happened, I think Sean would have been gone, and I don't believe for a second in Mickey saying they never had conversations. Well, maybe they never talked on the phone, or maybe they had texts, maybe they had emails, maybe they had a third party. I don't believe
maybe the
any
agent
of that.
was doing the negotiating.
Or maybe it's just a straight up lie that they did talk. I wouldn't put that.
Well, you
past
know where
them
I
either.
stand on that one. I think it's a straight up lie, but that's the way it is. But again, they've never been forthcoming out at Airline Drive ever. So why would they be forthcoming on this?
And why would they, after the fact, come out and say, "Yeah, this happened"? I don't necessarily blame them because they are moving forward. That's the plan.
Yes, agreed.
So I don't blame them, but just they have to say what they have to say.
Well,
publicly.
there's some smart guys out there. There's some guys that grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana, like you and I have.
Right.
Like Greg Bensel, that understand the psyche of this city, that we love to be loved, and don't you dare jilt us because that's, that we wash our hands of you.
Why do you think Sean Payton has his state of his career press conference where he's the most charming guy we've ever seen in a press conference for over an hour? Why do you think we saw that? He had to sell to the public, look, I legitimately want to be here. Just like he had to sell Josh Hill's the greatest tight end we've ever seen because Jimmy Graham just left.
Yes. On the flip side, which is kind of mind-boggling, the quickly, hastily called press conference with Mickey Loomis. One reporter from each publication or television station. No cameras. That was kind of like, wait, what? Your impressions.
I wouldn't say it was hastily called because Mickey Loomis last year waited a week after to do it. So it was around the time he would do it. The way it was, I guess maybe he felt like he could be more comfortable. It's not like he shut out the TV reporters or shut out radio or shut out us in print. And it wasn't one person per news organization, I could tell you that.
Well, one person per television station.
Per television station,
right,
yes, because there were 3 of us from NOLA.com at Times Picayune. There were a couple from The Advocate. But everyone was represented who regularly covers the team. But it's not like we figured Mickey was going to give us all the secrets. I mean, he never does that publicly. He just doesn't.
Jeff Ireland's role. Now, again, there was a lot of talk of a riff, this, that, the other thing. What do you think Jeff Ireland's role is going forward? Is his role strengthened now? Is it the same as it was? Where do you think he stands in the hierarchy?
Again, no one's ever going to say this publicly, but I do think his role has to be strengthened. I do think Ireland comes from a different background than Mickey as far as in football. Ireland can help out, and even Mickey Loomis admitted that Jeff Ireland brings an element that wasn't there in previous years. And let's overall, the acquisitions, draft, some free agent, nice finds. You look at the overall spectrum. Don't let Brandon Brown and don't let C.J. Spiller, even though they cost the most, and they did. Both of them got Fs in my grades,
as they should have.
Right, but they did make some nice moves, and so I think there is an element to where Jeff Ireland has helped. I do anticipate his role will be increased a year in, more comfortable with him. And I think Sean Payton probably feels a little more comfortable with him as well.
And finally, for the audience, before we go to break, splash reports. You know, I'm one that believes these are quality reporters who are plugged into the NFL, who are paid at a very high level because they get information and they disseminate that information. I believe the splash reports. Do you believe the splash reports? Do you believe that they were, that again, from early September to now, those splash reports were accurate at coming from somewhere with either within the organization or within the agents out there?
Yes, I do. And I wouldn't, and look, I've talked to enough people myself throughout this whole thing. Even before, remember when I guess the first big splash report came out, not the Peter King speculation, but when Adam Schefter reported, oh, Indy and Miami, those two teams might be in the market. Literally, probably 3 or 4 days earlier, I'd been getting some whispers that, look, the Saints, they may be looking for a coach because Sean Payton may be wanting to go, and it wouldn't be coming from the Saints' end. It would be coming from Payton's end. And so I believe everything, and it's the same scenario. Everyone needs to think back Chris Paul. Remember when he basically forced his way out of town? It's the same scenario, and yet you think, oh, well, wow, all this stuff happens, and it looks bad, but that is the way it works now with media, with generating interest for someone, negotiating. It's the way it works. You use back channels. You don't necessarily use, for a reporter, you say it's a source. But this is someone who is in the know.
Right, credible.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE with our live broadcast at 6 p.m. Also on Friday night here on WLAE at 10 p.m. You can also catch us in Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and Lafayette on Pelican Sports Television every Friday night at 9 p.m. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Larry Holder of NOLA.com is our guest tonight. We're heading to the phone lines we get back. 866-3200 is the number. Stick around.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
My life is full of statistics. Thing is, I could have dropped out of school and become one myself, but I didn't because I had people that believed in me. Here's another statistic. 7,000 students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. It's time that students know that we believe in them.
Inspire a student and share your message of support at boostup.org.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. 866-3200 is the phone number. Larry Holder of NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune is our guest. We go to the phone lines. Your thoughts on the changes within the coaching staff?
Changes were going to have to happen. You can't look at the way the offensive line was erratic, the way the defense struggled. You knew changes had to have been made. And so it's not a total stunner to me that Brett Ingles was essentially let go. It wasn't a total stunner to me that you make a change at the secondary coach. Wesley McGriff almost left last year. He essentially sidestepped back to college. He was given a co-defensive coordinator tag. It's just for a title.
Yes.
He's basically the secondary coach now at Auburn. And when Dan Campbell wasn't getting head coaching jobs, I had a good sense that Sean Payton would go after his guy. He loves what Dan Campbell can bring. Now I'm curious to see what happens. He's got an assistant head coach tag. We're not totally clear what that means for Joe Vitt.
Right.
But then you bring in Joe Lombardi. That makes complete sense. Back to quarterbacks coach.
How about Aaron Glenn?
Look, I think Aaron Glenn, I could tell you, I covered him as a player with the Texans when I was working in Houston.
Yes.
And when he was briefly with the Saints. he certainly knows what he's talking about. And so he was an assistant DB's coach. He got bumped up. He commands respect, and he certainly knows the cornerback position. So I think this has to help. You have to make some sort of move, and he may be able to mesh better with Dennis Allen, because Allen and McGriff were just kind of thrown together.
Greg Lewis left this week, was a quality control coach, also worked the wide receivers. You anticipate any additions there as well?
Well, they probably make a move. I know a lot of people say, oh, he coached wide receivers. Bring back Curtis Johnson.
Well, what about that? Because a lot of people believe that would be a good thing for this organization to have CJ back on that field.
I think their current guy, Johnny Morton, actually deserves a lot of credit. He is more of the CJ ilk. He is not a sit-back kind of guy like Henry Ellard was. So I think Morton has actually been good for the wide receivers. So I don't think you make a change there. I think Cooks has gotten better. I think Snead's gotten better. I think you've seen growth out of Coleman. I think that is a good move. So I would not make any moves there. And I don't know if CJ would want to come back and be an assistant wide receivers coach. I don't know.
Plus, he's getting paid right now, too.
Right.
So, I mean, again,
wait for a good job.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, to the phone lines we go. Thanks so much for holding. Let's head to Greg in Houma. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey, guys. My question is this. I know we really whiffed on a lot of free agents in the past couple of years, but of all the free agents that will be available throughout the NFL, is there anyone that you think we should bring in that would help this team win immediately? And I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, Greg. I guess the question is cost, huh? They're gonna be kind of bottom feeding here and looking for bargains.
Yeah, I think cost matters. I think they're definitely going to be gun shy because of the strikeouts with Jarris Byrd. And let's be honest, Jarris Byrd was never going to live up to that contract. He would need to be a Pro Bowler every year, and of course he's not going to be that. Brandon Browner, that's a miss. C.J. Spiller is a miss. Look, the one guy that would be a huge get for the Saints, who they're not going to get, would be Muhammad Wilkerson with the Jets. I just don't see that happening. Another guy who's kind of under the radar, he's still playing right now, would be a linebacker, someone like Danny Trevathan. He and Brandon Marshall for Denver shut down Gronk. He would be a big coup. I think he's going to get big money, though. So I just don't think they can go out and make the splashy free agent acquisitions they've made the last couple of years. Maybe they got to be a little trickier, get some trades. Look, just remember, they traded for a Jonathan Vilma.
Yes.
Maybe they can go that sort of route rather than going all in on a guy who's hitting free agency. And I always throw out this disclaimer. If a guy's hitting free agency, it means the other team, for some reason or another, doesn't feel the need. They have to have him back. And there's a reason why free agents, the vast majority of them, do not live up to expectations.
Yes. To New Orleans East and DJ. DJ, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, DJ.
Hey, Eric, Larry. A couple of questions. Y'all mentioned earlier about the, I guess, so many positions that the Saints have need. You mentioned tight end and offensive lineman, wide receiver maybe, and then even on defense, all the linemen and all. Do you think the Saints would be willing to trade back and maybe pick up an extra second and third rounder and maybe, solidify some of those positions? And I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you, DJ.
I think it's certainly a scenario that could happen. Look, how they rarely trade back in the first round. And yet, if, say, a Jared Goff or a Paxton Lynch or someone, again, Goff is a quarterback from California, Lynch is a quarterback from Memphis, or if somebody really covets, say, Carson Wentz, who's a big 6'6" quarterback from North Dakota State, it's almost like a hidden Joe Flacco again. If somebody really wants them at 12, I think the Saints would be smart to stockpile picks and make it happen because they do have a lot of needs. And yet, we've seen in the past, like, they're more apt to trading up.
Yes, yes. What about next year's draft? I mean, what about maybe saying, look, we need an influx of talent. Really, the organization's kind of on the clock here. Maybe looking forward and maybe grabbing some future picks to try to get into this draft and maybe beef up this team in this upcoming year. That's something they haven't done in the past. You think that's something that they would go against the grain and do?
I don't know. I think it would be a gamble because you're still gambling on Breeze.
Yes.
So I think you're still trying to win now. They're always in win now mode.
Right.
Obviously, because Drew Brees plays the final 2 games, they're in still win now
Right.
mode. But I don't think that would be something they'd be interested in because I do think that this draft is more has more depth in the first round than it has in a few years. Obviously, we'll learn more as we go forward. But I do think that you want to focus in and get some of these players because they're probably, some years grades, they only have 20 guys that have first-round grades. I think you're going to see more of that this year.
To Kenner and Larry. Larry, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for taking my call as usual. Larry, how you doing?
Doing great. Control room, could you turn the callers up if you would,
you're
please?
You're a good guy. Eric and Larry, I just want to know, do y'all think Austin Johnson will be back this year? And like I told you last week, Eric, Sean Payton got that gleam in his eye when he brought the Saints out that tunnel when they played Atlanta. And he had a tear in his eye when he said, I don't want to play for nobody but Mr. Benson. That tells you right there. He's got a big broom. He's sweeping the house. Watch the Saints. Buckle your chin straps, baby. We're going next year.
Thank you. Thank you for the call, Larry. Appreciate it. To Pat in New Orleans. Hey, Pat. Welcome to the show.
The impact of Frank Wilson leaving LSU, going to San Antonio, what will that impact be on the LSU football team? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Well, obviously, it's a big loss, in my opinion, and I think you would agree as well. But softened by Ed Ogeron, in my opinion. I don't think if they would have. I don't think they could survive the move if it wasn't for Ed Ogeron being a big. Corey Raymond has turned into a pretty darn good recruiter as well, and I think that kind of opened up the door for Frank Wilson to move on. But look, there is no doubt what he's been able to do with LSU in terms of recruiting has been nothing less than phenomenal during his time at LSU.
Yeah, I think Les Miles and LSU knew at some point this was going to happen, so you basically have to have a backup plan. Ogeron's it. And LSU a lot of times can sell itself now, even though they struggled a little bit this year. But still, you look at the rivals and the Sports 24/7s, and LSU's either number 1 or number 2 in recruiting, and that's not going to fall off at least this year,
right?
Because of the departure of Frank Wilson. But they prepared themselves. They knew at some point this was going to happen. It's almost like you got to prepare yourself for when Drew Brees leaves.
Right.
Always keep that door open. Make sure you're prepared. But look, Frank Wilson has been a huge impact
no doubt.
for LSU. And he deserves an opportunity.
He absolutely
like this.
deserves it.
Absolutely.
And look, went to a place where he's not going to really hurt LSU in terms of maybe grabbing some of those players that may be destined for LSU. Now, some of the other teams in Louisiana he may hurt going in and grabbing some of those players, but I don't know if he'll hurt LSU at UT San Antonio. But I'm happy for him, and I think everybody should be. He gave a lot to the LSU program.
Oh, absolutely.
There's no doubt about it. Michael is in Houma. Hey, Michael, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Okay. My comment is basically about the free agents. The New Orleans Saints hadn't done well as far as free agents, and particularly C.J. Spiller, running back. I would like someone in the scouting department to take a look at it. Elijah McGuire at USL Raging Cajuns. He tested the waters for the draft, but decided to go back for his senior year. I think he's a lot better than C.J. Spiller. He could make a lot of people miss and everything. He'd be a good third down back for the Saints. So I would like the scouting department to keep an eye on him during the season and maybe pick him up next year. That's my comment.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate the phone call. CJ's kind of changing this team because of his contract at this point, but they got a pretty full backfield, something we haven't talked about.
Right. And if they really wanted to depart with CJ, they could. And I wouldn't necessarily blame them. I mean, you would be eating some money, but you would save some money because he just doesn't fit. As far as with CJ, I think there are certain factors that all played a part into his disappointing season. I think the Saints misevaluated what type of player he is. They thought he would be a Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles type guy. They thought he was a guy who can juke and get in space and be shifty. C.J. Spiller is just a straight line speed guy. And I also do think, is there some truth to maybe the knee injury hindering C.J. throughout the season? Maybe a little bit. But I also do think that C.J. had trouble picking up the offense. You don't get 5 snaps a game if you know what you're talking about. And so I think that was a big problem as well.
Robert is in New Orleans. Robert, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Robert.
Hey, yeah, I had a quick question. Saying that the receivers had a hard time, we don't have a receiver that anybody fears. What you think about the Saints giving a low low draft pick for somebody like a Josh Gordon, who have trouble in Cleveland, and it would be a win-win situation because he's a low, he's a higher risk, but he's a low, I think it would be a good possibility for them to get him.
Okay, Robert, thank you for the phone call. They've kind of shied away after the Junior Gillette situation from guys that are problems in the locker room. Do you think they would take a chance on such a player now?
Well, first, Gordon's got to get reinstated.
Right.
He's been out the league for a year. I know he's trying to get reinstated.
I read recently
now.
he believes he is going to be.
Well,
but that's
I'm sure he believes a lot of things too. But first, he's got to get reinstated. I understand the logic. I just don't see the Saints wanting to put up with Josh Gordon at all. I know when he was floating around. Was he in the compensatory draft? I think he was the supplemental draft. And Cleveland went after him. Josh Gordon was not on the Saints board. He's certainly not going to be on their board now. I understand the logic, but I just don't see that scenario playing out.
I think they are very leery of someone that can come in and break up the chemistry of that locker room.
Now more than ever.
I agreed. I mean, I think they saw that. They're paying for it dearly. To the tune of $12 million going to Junior Gillette
for one guy.
Yeah, for one guy, and I think they're going to be. I think I believe when they say they're trying to go back to 06. They want quality guys in the locker room that love football. They're going to have great work ethic. Again, back in 06, it was a different deal. They were playing for the city, et cetera, et cetera. They got caught up in all that. There's no doubt about it. But I think those are the type of individuals they're looking for going forward.
Oh yeah, and 06, I think that was kind of something they didn't anticipate happening.
No.
To start 10-6, go to the NFC title game.
Right.
I think that was well above and beyond what they anticipated. The next 2 years were probably more of what maybe they anticipated the first year, but that took some time to build. And it's not like they had superstars on defense, and so they were able to make it happen. So this thing's got to kind of build. Maybe it builds quickly into next season. But yeah, that was a successful blueprint, and you can't go out and be a big player in free agency and spend a ton of money on Jarris Byrd and gamble spending money on a pass rusher like Junior Gillette. And we've seen what's happened. It's bit them. I
see more of a Fajita Shanley-like player that the Saints will go for than a Josh Gordon-like player going forward.
Absolutely. Well, and just a side note, a guy like Haile Kikaha, he trained with Scott Shanley leading up to the draft, and so that's a guy that would certainly like. And Shanley and Fajita, you mentioned those two guys, spoke and loudly on Twitter when the announcements of the assistant coaches were made. Lombardi comes back. Aaron Glenn was added. Dan Campbell was added. Those guys played with those guys. And so, look, they know when quality's there and when quality's not.
And then to throw in another one, the linchpin, as you mentioned earlier, the trading for Jonathan Vilma, which really solidified the defense.
Absolutely. And that, again, that was not what you would do free agency. They traded and made a smart trade.
Yes.
And it was one of the best trades they've ever made in franchise history.
Absolutely agree. To Metairie and Brett. Brett, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Brett.
Hey, man, how you guys doing tonight? Just real quick, I just wanted to say, okay, Mark Ingram. The Saints, with the team we have, obviously Chris Ivory's going to the Pro Bowl. We just find running backs. That's what we do. We make running backs, whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying, what is the possibility? Obviously, we need defense. What is the possibility of trading Mark Ingram? I mean, obviously his stock is high right now. Tim Hightower runs hard. obviously harder than Mark Ingram, and so does Kyrie Robinson. And then you sign a guy like Spiller, and then you bring Cadet, you plug him right back in, and look what he does. I'm just saying, what is the possibility of, trading for a guy like Ingram and trying to get a starter on defense,
Thank you, Brett, for the phone call. I think you're always leery when you make a trade because of now, especially with the cap situation, because of dead money. But your thoughts on something like that? If not a Mark Ingram, other so-called assets on the team, maybe moving those.
I think the caller is undervaluing what Mark Ingram brings. Look, a shoulder injury. It's not something that's something that would linger or that be a habitual problem. Look, Mark Ingram was one of the best weapons they had on offense until he got hurt. For a while, he was one of the league leaders in all in yards rushing and receiving. He was like top 4 or 5. So they used him a lot, big in pass protection. I don't think that would work. Look, I understand people saw Tim Hightower play well. I just don't think he's got 5 years of that left in him.
And because I'm wondering if he's got 16 games of that left in him.
Right, exactly. He played great, and he's a great story.
No doubt.
And yet, I just don't think. I don't know if you're gonna get the value that you think that Mark Ingram presents for some big time stud defensive star. I don't think Mark Ingram's there. And look, you mentioned Spiller. I don't think he's a big part of the future. Cadet, he's never really been a running back per se in this offense. And Kyrie Robinson, he's got to come back.
Right. That's a restricted free agent.
And he's a restricted free agent too. So what do you do with him? And he's got to come back from that injury. And if you look at what Kyrie Robinson did before the injury, he had 4 touchdowns, but the guy only averaged 3.2 yards a carry last year. I think people kind of don't see that coming either.
Look, I don't think there's any doubt that Ingram has turned into a pretty darn good back. Was not patient when he first got here. He realized he understands the offense now, understands the role, and he is a guy that I think runs hard. Whereas before, you maybe wondered about how hard he ran. A lot of that I think was a byproduct of watching Kyrie Robinson and others run hard, and maybe got a little bit of the fever. But he's definitely an asset going forward. What about Dennis Allen? Your thoughts about him now as defensive coordinator moving forward, putting his fingerprints on this defense. How different will this defense be from what we've seen maybe over the last few years with maybe disciples of Buddy Ryan?
I do think when Dennis Allen took over, we did see an improvement. You were never going to improve totally in the numbers. The numbers were always going to be bad because you couldn't get out of that hole. Now, look, Dennis Allen had a lot of his fingerprints on the defense when Rob Ryan was there, but now it's totally his, and I think he was able to get hands-on experience with the players because there are the Saints are going to have a lot of these players back, even though we're talking about they need change. Look, Bro's going to be back. Kikaha, Anthony, Bird, Vaccaro, Keenan Lewis if he's healthy. Of course, Cam Jordan, I think John Jenkins, Tyler Davidson. So a lot of the players that you've seen are going to be back. So he has some hands-on experience. But I do think that he brings a far different element than Rob Ryan did. Rob Ryan, and I've heard this a lot of times, even when he was going well, that he was, a lot of people like players coach, that he worried a lot more about players liking him rather than telling them the truth. Dennis Allen is about as frank as they can get, and we saw that happen when Brandon Browner and Dennis Allen kind of got into on the sideline.
More organized is another thing we hear about Dennis Allen than maybe a Rob Ryan.
Absolutely.
Yes. Considering how organized Sean Payton is, that's got to be a plus on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, that's why Sean brought in Dennis in the first place and knew eventually he would be the defensive coordinator. And so I do think Dennis Allen can help the defense. Now, how far can he help them? I'm not going on a ledge to say how far they can take until we see what some of the players they bring in.
There's a dearth of talent, okay? I mean, that's the problem. It's lack of talent. I don't care. You can have the greatest defensive coordinator of all time out there, and you still got to have talent to be able to play the system.
Actually, you could be Steve Spagnuolo, whose system doesn't work anywhere else, but if you got talent, it makes you look good.
It makes you look good as well. One troubling thing last year, the lack of participation by coaches in the Senior Bowl. Do you anticipate, in the past, we saw full blown, everybody there, searching for rookies. Do you anticipate everyone being there, including Sean Payton this year?
I would anticipate that happening, those guys. Do I know for a fact? No, but I do think that the coaches need to kind of get their hands into what's going on there. And you know, it's one thing to have scouts tell you what's going on. It's another to get a first eye view,
right,
and to get a little chat before you go to combine.
There's no doubt. I think that is an enormous plus for a team. First of all, if you can be a coach for the Senior Bowl, that helps you even more. But I think you've got to be there and you've got to participate. Final question for you. Final 4 games last year, they're piggybacking on that, saying they like the way everything kind of ended up. When you look at the opponents, is it fool's gold?
No, I think they played better. Look, and even though they lost to Carolina, that was a good game.
Yes.
And so I think without that growth, I think Sean Payton really tries to push himself out the door. So the fact that there was growth, I think he can see that there is something to build upon. How quickly can that be built upon remains to be seen.
Larry, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
You got it.
We thank Larry Holder of NOLA.com for being our guest tonight on Inside New Orleans. Remember, there is a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also on the Pelican Sports Network in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette at 9 p.m. You can catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO, 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. weekdays. Also on the TuneIn Radio app, and you can listen live, download the podcast at your leisure at ericasher.com, where you can also catch all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports as well. Again, special thanks to our guest, Larry Holder, also to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Donovan Joseph, Kenny Juneau, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. For Larry Holder, I'm Eric Asher. New Orleans, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week for Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.